Hello everyone, I'm back with the red Spec V because I managed to get myself an '06 ECU conversion and a tuner. So to convert my car to an '06 ECU, because I have the '03 and they didn't have quite as many features, is I have the '06 ECU and the wiring harness that goes along with it, which has a few of these jumper cables in it so that that can communicate with the body better. I have an '06 gauge cluster, an '06 gas pedal, the updated MAF that they use in '06, and then the wide band because in these '03 cars they just had a narrow band. Then performance parts, while I was already in there, I got a metal MAF housing that doesn't have a screen or anything, so it can flow a little better. I've got bigger 440cc injectors. I've got the tuner itself. Then these are actually the coils that came on the car, because what I set on the car yesterday for testing are these GTR coils, and they are much stronger than those ones. So now that I've gone through this headache that I have to go through, let's start by tearing apart his engine bay. I'm gonna pull off the front bumper so that I have more room right here. And where I'm gonna start is by pulling off the strut brace and pulling off my whole intake system, because most of the wiring harness is actually tucked underneath that intake manifold. All right, now the intake manifold has been taken off, when we have access to this main wiring harness back here, I'm gonna pull the ECU out of the firewall. And with the ECU out of the firewall and the protective case split, see the plugs here? And if you see that some of this wiring harness will go into the cab, and we'll have to go to the passenger seat to disconnect that to get the rest of this harness out. After removing the glove box and the lower tray for the passenger side, you can see we have this whole wiring assembly tucked up in here, so you can get that down. It is these two plugs and these two both have to be pushed through the firewall, and you should be able to actually see where it goes through up in there. Once these four are pushed through the firewall, it now begins the long process of unplugging all these sensors and engine parts that are connected to this harness. Now, you don't have to unplug everything, because things like this, like the fans and lights, they connect to their own harness right here. So my advice is just take this and just follow it along, unplugging as you get down until it splits off into its own harness, and it comes out much easier than it seems it would. After just a minute or two of pulling sensors, I've got the old harness out over there. The new harness is fully ready to go in, but because of the way this new ECU mounts in, I'm actually gonna mount that first and go from there. All right, I've got the new ECU in there looking all pretty, but before I bury this fuel rail, I'm gonna put my bigger injectors in. So that's as simple as pulling off this metal clip. This injector will pop out. I just pop the new one in and put this retaining clip back on. It's really not too bad of a job. The hardest part is just getting the thing out. All right, just a little bit of work later. I've got the new ECU in and it's fully plugged in. All sensors are connected, other than things like the intake manifold and the fuel rail, because I don't have any of that in yet. I plan on cleaning up all this wiring before I get that in. The biggest thing I would like to note is that you'll have this O2 sensor plug that is now unused and left unplugged because the car is now using this wideband instead of that O2 sensor. So now it's time to get this wiring cleaned up and get the intake manifold on so I can move on to the inside of the car. Once the engine bay is all bolted back together and looking good, we have to move on to the more tedious part. That is getting the cluster and gas pedal in, which if you noticed I did paint this. It was like a brown gold before. The main part that's tedious is all the wiring that we have to do. All right, I had to push the car forward to get better access to the interior. But a good place to start. Get these plugged in and hung back up in their assembly. Then you'll have these wires that come out. They will have tags on them, like that. And they will have an OBD 6 and 14, and then you have a cluster 5 and a cluster 6. They will run through the dash. The 2 cluster ones will go up to there. The 2 OBD ones will go down to the OBD 2 plug. Now, I already have my cluster out, but to pull it out, you'll have the plastic piece that is bolted. It has screws going through right here, right there. That will just pop out of those 2 clips down at the bottom. And then the cluster itself has 3 screws, one right there, there, and there. And then it'll come out about halfway and you have to unplug both of these. Then, to the cluster out, you'll also have to pull out this panel to get access to the OBD2 plug. It has a screw right there. And there's a recessed screw over here. And then it'll also pop out. But be careful when pulling it, because your OBD2 plug is screwed into it and you don't want to mess up the wires that come out of that. Once this lower panel is pulled, you'll see what I mean about the OBD2 plug being screwed in. So we'll pull those screws out, slide it out, and get this panel out of the way. Once those panels are off, we come back over to the passenger side so we can start running these wires to their designated areas. Personally, I like to go back behind there while tucking them up into the existing harness as well. Okay, the pinning is kind of annoying, so I figured I'd show how it's done. There will be 2 white retaining clips inside of this. So those 2, they will pop off with clips on the side. And what you'll need to do, push something small, you can use things like the iPhone SIM card thing. I have a cotter pin I bent. But you'll push in a lock in that middle, and it will free up this pin so that you can then pull it out. And once it's out, you set it off to the side and you'll be free to push the new pin in. Alright, now the OBD2 plug runs on a similar concept. You have these 2 flaps, if I can get it to focus. You have these 2 flaps on the side. They're normally sitting down. You pop those up and bend them out the way. And you'll still have the locks in the middle. And then, based on a diagram I should have had on screen for a minute now, you can just pull out the ones you need and put back in these jumper cables. Once you've got those wired in, we're going to do the last step, that is getting this pedal in. So you just have to undo the 3 bolts to hold that in, get the new one in, and get it all plugged in. Okay, well, we're slightly in the future because I had a few problems. I had to swap out to Gen 2 Spec V injectors because the 440s I had don't have a great reliability. And I still have a completely dead cluster. That's why I've just got the skeleton of one. I pulled the face off and everything. But everything's all together, and since I have Uprev on this car, I'm going to show you guys how it works. Where we start with Uprev, you should download the software from uprev.com. Once you do that, you should be able to come in here and type in ROM editor. It'll be right here. That is what Uprev uses, and you'll need this cable to process that. Okay, and then you'll want to start by just having the USB plugged in. Still have it unplugged from OBD, and it'll give the cable info right here. You'll want the licenses. Mine says used because I have already put the tune on this car and made sure it works. But once you know everything's good there, then we can power the car on, just key on, engine off, and this should say ready, and then we can go from there. Okay, we've got that plugged in and powered on. And once we let it load for a minute, you'll see it says ECU ready right there. ECU information's right here. See, mine is already flashed. To put the tune on it, you'll have flash tune file right here. And that'll bring up this. See, there's my tune. It's just a stock with larger math for data logging while I get the custom one made. That's where you put that one on. Now, if your tuner wants data logging, you'll come into right here, and they should have sent you the data logging thing. So you'll come into schemes right here, load scheme, and theirs should also be, if they sent you one, it should also be right here. You'll load that on, and whenever you're driving the car, you just hit the record right here, do things like cold starts, warm starts, just quick drives, and you click done on that. Once it's done, you'll come into file, and you'll be able to save it, and then your tuner, if you're using a tuner, they should have an email you send that info to so they can make you a better tune. That's where I'm at with this one. I've sent the info to the tuner and the custom one's being made. So right now it's kind of just in like a weak kind of state, but here soon it should be a lot better.